Welcome to this week's program, looking very, very new and shiny and bright, I must confess. Today we're going to be looking at a very interesting dairy shed in Ashburton. John Watt is going to be here talking about economics, and Kerry Moore is going to be talking about Rural Women New Zealand, plus red clover. But first of all, Rachel, ram soundness.
Yes.
And preparing for the breeding season. Timing?
So we're coming up to tupping in autumn, so we certainly want to be having a look at the rams a good month out from your planned tupping dates. Make sure that they are healthy, that they're sound, that we have no fertility issues or concerns going forwards.
So what can go wrong?
So certainly there's a lot of conditions that can affect the fertility of rams, and actually anything that can cause a raised temperature in the body. So we're talking general diseases as well, hoof abscesses, pneumonias, things like this can actually affect your fertility going forwards as well, right down to things that affect the genital tract as well.
It's interesting you mentioned feet, because of course they've got to get around a bit, don't
They do, so that's something to always be aware of as well, is your hoof soundness, making sure there's no foot rot or scald issues. They need to be sound, and they need to be able to probably cross some large distances during the breeding.
Wool length on the scrotum, obviously a major problem, or can be.
It can be. So some of your more wooled breeds will have quite a lot of wool on the scrotum. That can increase the testicular temperature, and that affects your fertility as well. So getting in and crutching them prior to mating is a good idea too.
Mange is a hell of a bad word. I hate
It
the word.
is.
The mental pictures.
Choreoptic mange, it can cause some really thickened lesions on the scrotum. That has the effect of increasing the temperature there and can actually render rams permanently infertile as well if it's not detected and addressed in time.
So basically you're talking about bringing the rams in, aren't you, and
Bring
actually
the rams
doing a
in.
physical?
Absolutely. So getting them into the yards, doing a physical. If you're part of the brucellosis testing scheme, which is a voluntary scheme, getting the vets out at this time as well to palpate and also do any blood testing that's required. But certainly getting them into the yards, having a look, having a good feel, and noting any problems with testicular size, structure, scrotums and that sort of thing.
Yes, that's the vet's job really, because you know what you're looking for.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll actually assess size, making sure things are even and developed as they should be.
Now, what's this you'll have to pronounce that.
Epididymitis.
Thank you.
That's an infection within the epididymis which directly affects your fertility, most commonly caused by brucellosis, Brucella ovis, but also can be caused by other infections. So something that needs to be detected early. In some cases with other infections it may be treatable or it may resolve with time. Brucellosis, it generally renders infertile, and if you're part of the scheme to clear it from your herd.
Okay, brucellosis, let's focus on that.
Sure, so bacterial disease that affects the fertility of your rams. It's spread through mating between rams and can have quite large effects on your fertility through the mating season.
Is there some sort of a blood test or something you can do?
There is. So initially concerns are raised with palpation, and we detect epididymitis, so lesions and thickening in that region. And from there we'll go ahead and do some blood tests, and you can detect the disease on blood testing. Anything that's infected, we would recommend actually culling from the flocks, as you can actually go ahead and eradicate it from your mob as well.
And then of course you've got a problem, you're a couple of months out and you need another couple of rams.
Yes, yes. So certainly getting onto it early, or being aware of it and addressing it after the breeding season, so as you can
How long does
clear.
it take to take effect? Because if you check now, for example, and you're not going to be using the ram for 6-8 weeks, whatever it might be.
So if you've got brucellosis within the mob, you will generally have rams that are infected at this point. If you had new rams come in that were infected and introduce them to your flock that wasn't infected, yes, you could miss some lesions, and you'll generally then see a lower fertility than expected. And certainly if we inspected those rams after mating, we'd potentially detect some of these lesions.
Bringing new rams onto the property, make sure they're checked before they get there is what you're suggesting?
Yep, so part of the brucellosis scheme is actually having all rams checked within 3 months of sale. So if you're buying from a reputable breeder, part of that scheme, then you should have assurances that you're buying rams that are free of disease.
Is there any difference between sort of, or any more care for stud rather than commercial, or is it pretty much the same testing?
Within the testing there is, so your stud testing, all stud rams, all teaser rams, all rams going for sale are actually blood tested. In your commercial flocks, you know, the large commercial flocks, everything is palpated, but only 20 rams are actually blood tested within that, and any rams that have lesions. So.
And of course the other thing is make sure they're sound and they're in good order, because they're probably not going to eat much for a couple of months.
So you want to have your rams in good condition going into the tupping season, and making sure that they've got good, you know, healthy feet, that there's no lameness issues, and not too heavy in wool coat either.
Exactly, Rachel, thank you very much indeed.
Great,
After the break, it's Rural Women New Zealand. Welcome back to Rob's Country. Family violence. We don't think about rural sectors and family violence.
No, we don't. But like everywhere in society, it does happen, sadly, and it shouldn't. And it's something that Rural Women is very concerned about. We know the statistics are out there that it's happening more than we'd like to think, both you know, male versus female, female versus male, and child abuse. It all happens in all parts of society, and certainly rural is not immune to it. So we're partnering with the Ministry of Social Development and the It's OK to Ask for Help program, and we're sending out stickers to put on letterboxes as a way of reminding people that family violence is a community issue, and we're standing up saying it's not acceptable, and it's about making communities safer, getting the information about helplines out there and saying, look, it's not okay, but it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to seek assistance. So trying to get that message out there.
It's going to be a hard one, because people on farms and farming rural areas aren't very good at that at any time, let alone admitting there's a problem.
So what we've tried to do is make it a little bit more fun, a bit easier, and that the sticker goes on the letterbox. You take a photo of it, send it in, could be a prize in it for you, as a way of ensuring the stickers do actually get on letterboxes, because I know what it's like when something comes in the mail. It looks like another flyer, so it goes in the bin, but we really want people to use them and to get them up there and create that awareness and that way of society dealing with the problem and saying, look, it's not okay in our community, it's okay to ask for help, and here's where you can go for help.
So you're really looking at children and women, and
I guess initially,
the sort of the main areas? The
main areas, yeah. I mean, family violence in rural, it's the same but different in urban. There's certain things that happen in rural areas that you don't see in the cities, and it's things, that sort of insidious thing. It's not necessarily physical violence, but it's intimidation and that psychological thing. And it'll be something as simple as having the electric fence around the house all the time, so she can't get out. He might be sitting at the table cleaning the gun, and it's just that insidious, that if you do something, this is the repercussion. We also see instances of violence against animals, and it's a way of saying, well, I hit the animal, I didn't hit her, but if you do that next time, that's what will happen to you. So it's kind of insidious, and by inference that it's there. So it's really nasty stuff. That mental, psychological.
A black eye, you can actually come and say, well, yeah, sure, I've got a black eye.
Yeah, and interestingly, with the SPCA, we've also done some work with them on a Pets as Pawns project, and they've said that the statistics showed that abuse of animals, the injuries are identical to those of family violence, where the animal will have a black eye or the animal will have a broken limb, and it's about replicating and saying, so the woman very clearly sees what's going to happen to her next time. So really insidious mental, psychological violence.
And is this really quite widespread?
I wouldn't say widespread, but it is certainly happening, and we are aware of it, and there are statistics that support that. So it is different in the rural areas.
It's enough for you, obviously, to be very concerned.
We are concerned, and it shouldn't be happening. Our women and children need to be safe, because certainly in rural, they don't have the same ability to seek assistance either. We don't have the women's refuges in rural, and we don't have, the neighbour over the fence who can give support, so they are more isolated. So it's certainly perhaps a more terrifying situation in rural than it might be in the cities.
And those sorts of people aren't going to be allowed to join your organisation?
No, and so isolation is also another factor that's can also be working against women. So, really important, and it's a campaign we're really strong on at the moment.
Yeah, all power to you, Robbo.
Thank you.
Rural internet.
Rural internet, the rollout of broadband is going really well. They're halfway along the project at the moment. It's another 2.5 years to go. Some big gains have been made in getting fibre optic out. As you know, it's focusing mostly on fibre optic, but unfortunately it's focusing on schools and health, hospitals and medical centres, which is great. They must be included in technology. For the average householder, if you live along the line where the fibre optic is, great, you can hook in. If you don't, there's no actual improvement for you. So it's very limited, the actual overall improvement for rural people in terms of internet and ultra-fast broadband. And we're also a wee bit concerned that in 2.5 years' time, the Rural Broadband Initiative ends and the funding for that ends, but there doesn't appear to be any real plan for what happens going forward from that. And it's like, so what's next? And really looking for some news coming forward about what's the next step in getting people who aren't on that fibre optic line connected with better ultra-fast broadband.
And I'm sure you'll be walking through doors without opening them in Wellington.
We will be.
Kerry, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, dairying, we've always sort of talked about green grass and with the fact that we feed our animals in the paddock, but that's changing a fair bit, certainly here in mid-Canterbury.
Yeah, the property was for sale. It was an ex-sheep farm which wintered some cows, but it had a very low nitrate loading attached to the water consent. So there wasn't much you could do with the property, and I got interested because I always looked at this concept of farming, and some people were, trying to prove this was the right way to go in Southland. And see if we could copy this in Canterbury and get to live up to the very tight conditions on this farm.
It's a wee bit different to a Southland barn in so much it's open around the edges.
Yeah, so like here we don't have the extreme temperatures what you have in Southland. So here in the winter it's still quite mild, other than the odd day. But the cow seems to be very comfortable in here, and the fresh air is really helping.
Production?
Oh, it's phenomenal so far. We way beyond expectation. Like we have cows doing 800 solids one after the other. So on average, we don't know where it ends up yet, but we really easy meeting budget for the first year.
And they still go outside?
After the morning milking, they go outside, and then they come in around lunchtime and have another bit of dinner presented to them, so they balances the diet a bit more, and then at night they stay inside, so they're close to the dairy shed in the morning.
And tell me about what they're eating, because they're enjoying it.
Yes, they have a mixed ration. There'll be maize as a base diet, then they have lucerne, a normal silage, and then they have some potatoes. They love the potatoes, and then some grain and extra protein to create appetite.
And as far as the production, they look as though they're well-rounded, as though they're eating well.
Yes, they're always encouraged to eat, so we form the diet so they maximize intake. One of the interesting aspects is that they have to eat about 26 kilograms of dry matter to meet the expectations for the milk production they do. But as a matter of fact, they're only eating 23, so there's some 3-4 kilos that we can't account for.
I'm intrigued by your robot, which is scraping the food back so that they can reach it. You're pretty automated here.
Yeah. No, these things, they come from Europe, and there's a handful of them now in New Zealand, and they do a fantastic job. You can't copy it because they just work all day, and in the middle of the night, at 3 o'clock, and just hums along the cows and says, "Come on, eat."
So that's all programmed because nobody drives it. It just turned up into this area and went.
Yeah, when we installed it, it increased milk production by about 3 to 4 litres, just like that.
The manure scraped?
Yes, scraped, and then it goes into a central pipe where it goes to the effluent saucer. Then it gets separated in solids and liquid. The liquid gets further filtered so that no sludge enters the pond. And then from the pond it goes straight into the pivots, like with water, along with water.
two things, Willie, no smell and no noise. These cows are very contented.
Yes, that was the outset. We didn't want to have an environmental impact, dramatic environmental impact. We wanted to have top animal welfare. We wanted happy staff working here, and of course we wanted to make a profit.
Well, you would make a profit, but how does it stack up against all grass? Because you've done that.
It will match all grass systems. You know, it's a lot of money you have to outlay up front. So and you need to import a lot of skills to operate the system. But once it's all going, the staff seems to enjoy it. We had very little staff changes so far. So yeah, no, all good all around so far.
Willie, what about the environmental issues? Can you explain how it's working really, really well?
So yeah, like we run overseer quite regularly just to make sure that we meet the tight conditions that ECAN put on this property. First up, we went straight to ECAN and say, what can we do with the property? Can we meet the targets that you set on this property by you know, just simulating what we're going to do, and Ian Brown and Leo Feature from ECAN helped us through those difficult issues. And once we knew that we could meet them with what we were proposing, then we went ahead.
The manure. I want to talk to you about the manure because it's not normal dairy, it's more like a beef patty, if you know what I mean.
Yes, we feed like you're here in the dry cows, and they're certainly a lot firmer than the normal cows. But yeah, no, the key is that we have a typical TMR manure, which is a little bit more firm than one that's on hot pasture. So yeah, that's where we see also we get the extra production from, because we're feeding a lot less non-protein N, we call that in dietary terms. So we feed a lot less. You know, like we harvest all the nitrogen in the diet by extra proteins in the diet supplied to the cows as lupins and lucerne silage.
And of course, you're able to control when you put any effluent on as well.
Yes, you know, we only put effluent on when required. We have a storage facility for 4 months, and at the moment, most of the nitrogen goes on the maize crop to grow that to maximum length.
Is this the way of the future, do you think, Willie?
It's part of the way of the future. I don't think every farm has to go this far. This property required this. If we couldn't do anything else with it, or return it back to a sheep farm, which at that time wasn't very profitable. Is this the way of the future? It'd be part of the way of the future, because to make this kind of investment, you have to be in very solid shoes.
But how does it stack up against somebody doing a conversion without sheds and using a lot more acreage?
Oh, I think it does stack up, but you've got to have the knowledge and the skill base in the staff to execute the and there's a lot of detail required. You know, like the manager Hamish Davidson here does a mint job in keeping on top of the detail.
Would you do it again?
Absolutely, we're doing it again.
Absolutely amazing place, and that little thing that was pushing all the food back in, when the batteries get low, it goes back to its host area, plugs itself in, gets recharged, comes back out, and amazing, absolutely amazing. Brand new year, John Wally. How's it looking?
Is a brand new year. It's the 1st of March on Saturday, so it's not that new. But you know, the wheels opened up, a fine place. I think a lot better than we saw this time last year. I think that generally the news is positive. The manufacturers are feeling a bit better. The people I talk to are saying sort of it's a soft 10% up on last year.
A soft 10%.
A soft 10%. It's not a good 10%, but we're getting towards the 10%. And it's good news with regard to the payout, which is generally good news for all of the supply lines in New Zealand. And so things are feeling quite good now. There's a sort of underlying negativity we might get onto towards the end of this little chat, but the feeling is generally good.
3 years down the track now from the earthquake, and is the promised boom starting?
I think you've got to say the promised rebuild is starting. Whether it's going to be a boom is another thing. And to some extent, it's better to smear it out over 3 or 4 years, because if we try to do it all very quickly, then that means a massive increase in capacity, and that's sort of itinerant or mobile workers and those sorts of things that would have to be dealt with by the community. And so a rapid build rate, but a build spread over 4 or 5 years makes a lot more sense. We've got a new council. The new council's finding its feet. The vibrations are good. They want to see things happen. And I think one of the things that was said to me is, if you like, the last council was elected after the September earthquake, and it was sort of, we dodged a bullet and it's business as usual. And then they were confronted by February and June and December, and it clearly wasn't business as usual. This council have signed up for, or these councillors have signed up for a difficult, other than business as usual environment. So it hasn't been thrust upon them. They've chosen the job. And I think that they are apparently, thus far, really rolling up the sleeves and getting on with it. So I think that's the positive thing.
Because there are those in Wellington and Auckland and wherever who are saying that the economy is going to be great throughout the country because of our rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there is a demand, but it's the sort of broken windows theory of economic growth. You know, you break the windows and we have economic growth because somebody has to get the glass and fit the glass, but really all we're doing is putting back what was. So it depends on where you sit in the world, or whether you see this as growth or otherwise. I think on the other side of the rebuild, we will have that renewal. So a lot of the old stuff that was around will have been repaired and replaced. And we'll have a modern new city because of the very nature that it's had to be rebuilt. Whether it'll be the same, whether we'll see what the planners want is another matter. And certainly the district plan and the process around the district plan and the simplification, the improvement should break away those barriers that we've seen around planning approvals. I mean, my eldest wants to build a house up on Kennedy's Bush, and it was stuck in planning for a long time. This is for a sort of pretty straightforward, standard weatherboard house, probably flashier than I think he should be building, but nevertheless, it took a long time to get the planning approvals.
Briefly, election year?
Yeah, well, you know, I think we've all seen that in the news. We'll see a lot of positioning as we work through. There'll be some conversation around different policy frameworks. I hope it's a good debate. I hope we don't just descend into the standard mud fight around these things, that we do actually start to talk sensibly about what the options are. And I'm on record of wanting some different changes around the Reserve Bank and some fiscal policy.
Say very briefly, Reserve Bank.
Reserve Bank, well, we saw the message open up. We see medium-term inflationary pressures, and we're going to see lifts in the OCR come March or soon. My pressure back is, please don't lift the interest rates, put more pressure in the macro-prudential area. Let's wait for other people to start to normalise before we rush into it, because if we do, we'll see an impact in the currency.
Thank you very much indeed. He's always bang on the knocker too. You just watch what happens and unfolds. After the break, it's Jim Grierson. To Rob's Country. Season so far?
Well, it's been an interesting season, Rob, right from when the soft fruit started back in December, raspberries, strawberries. Everything was about 5 days earlier than normal, if there is a normal. And as we came through, stone fruit, cherries and what have you in Central Otago and now in Hawke's Bay, as we've gone towards more the autumn look, probably from around about mid-February onwards, or maybe the first week in February, we're now seeing the dates of harvest starting becoming a little bit more normal. So fruit came on very, very quickly. Interesting enough, it was ripe, but the bricks weren't that high, so the sugars weren't that high. Once we got a bit more temperature after Christmas, those bricks came up, quality improved immensely, and overall the quality throughout all of those types of fruits and vegetables have been very good. Because we haven't really had, up until just a week ago with the hail, we haven't really had any major weather events through the growing season. So that's made for good quality, and exports are going well. Commodity prices are reasonably strong. Anything going into Europe is finding it really tough, but because our market's now swinging so much towards the Asian, Malaysian, Philippines, and even to India and up into China, some strength there, and irrespective of the high dollar, there's some money to be made, which is good.
And black currants, which is one of your favourites?
The currants have gone very well. We had a season of around 8,000 tonnes, and once again the bricks were a bit low for a start off. Came through nicely after in the new year. Quality good, and we had a very good extraction rate. So the growers should be recompensed, I think, pretty well for that. And also the Ribena brand has gone extremely well and is growing rapidly, and especially in Malaysia.
Irrigation, I guess we're still fiddling around with it a bit.
Well, when you start to get past the harvest for these various crops, and at the moment the main two crops that are coming are kiwi fruit and of course the grapes, which are starting any day. But all those other crops are really underway or have finished. And if you don't get enough moisture on between, say, about the beginning of January through to the beginning of April, and I'm talking of about 300 mils per hectare over that period of time. I mean, the good Lord will give some of it to us, but mostly you have to introduce it. You need to have that to make sure you keep the growing going in the bushes and plants and trees, simply because they are developing their crop for next year, developing their buds. So that's very important, and that's very much coupled with, when we've found over the last 3 years especially, very much coupled with the introduction of a proper base fertiliser program for the autumn. And I've been encouraging growers in all of those various crops to get their sampling done more late January, early February, and then get their applications underway from now on, if not already done, to do so pretty quickly. This gives the time, with the moisture still in the ground, the temperature still, ground temperature is still very warm, it gets that fertiliser moving and gets it up into the root zone, and from the root zone up into the, whether it be a tree or a bush or a vine, by May, June, July, rather than when the ground's cooling down and shutting down. You have to wait until September, October to get the benefit of that fertiliser. So if you get it in now, it's there ready in the plant to go when the temperatures presumably will start to rise around about August, September. And ground conditions in August can be quite wet, in the South Island especially. So guys can't get the fertiliser on then. So they're better to do it now and get it into the plant.
So as far as the winter's concerned, we're going into autumn now, so winter's looming. Disease control?
Disease control, there's a bit of disease control needed right at the moment, clean up spray, especially with copper and things like that. All the spots, black spot, leaf spot, those sort of things. But no, crops come in very well. The crops are looking very well. The plant health is pretty blooming good, and it's due to the lack of bad events. There was some damage from the hail that came through the South Island last week, or earlier this week, and the guys have had to go out and do a bit of remedial work, but it hasn't damaged buds too much, especially in the grape industry and also in the berry fruit industry. So that's quite pleasing, really. Yeah.
Because I mean, the potatoes, for example, around Methven got hit.
Yes, quite badly, and so did the rape. Getting very close, a lot of pods on the ground. Fortunately, a lot of those crops are netted now, and the netting encapsulates the bush a bit, and of course there's not the damage, but well, not the loss. But those that haven't been netted, there's been a severe loss in some areas. Yep.
Yeah, which is a bit scary. So across the board, though, you're looking back over not a bad sort of a season.
Yeah, a good season for horticulture. The apples are in full swing now, and the colour's good. We're starting to get some cool nights. I mean, autumn's arriving, and having those nice warm temperatures during the day, cool temperatures at night, colour comes up very well. Bricks come up very well. They take a lot of potassium off because of the colour, but we can introduce that a bit later on. I think we're heading for a pretty good one. There's a lot of grapes out there. May not be enough tank capacity for the wine, but we'll talk about that in a month's time.
Once we get further down the track.
I think it has been a reasonably good growing year for the grapes, but I don't know whether it's going to be a vintage. And the reason why I say that, we haven't had consistently hot days through the autumn yet, and now we're getting these cool mornings. So it's going to be an interesting vintage.
Indeed, and let's hope it is a cracker.
Yeah, absolutely. The kiwi fruit guys tell me in the North Island and Nelson that the fruit size is good, the condition is good, obviously the gold is coming off now, and that's an exceptionally good condition.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. We've got more for you on Rob's Country straight after the break. Back to Rob's Country. Well, red clover seems to have disappeared off the radar a wee bit, but I caught up with Warwick Green and found out that it's not.
Yeah, we're in Paddock Rossi Red, Rob, which is the one that we market a lot throughout New Zealand and Australia. bred by RAGT in France. This is a magnificent variety. It's demonstrated in trials and in the pasture situation, you know, to really persist for sort of several years, 4 or 5 years, no trouble at all. This is actually a seed crop. This is a first-year seed crop. So as you can see, good flower numbers, and it's the bumblebees and the honeybees are working actively. It's a diploid variety, okay, so that means a slightly smaller seed, but also easier to pollinate. So probably for farmers, if they're looking at wanting to grow red clover, it's a good thing to think about it from the point of view of, you know, growing it in their pasture and allowing it at some point in time to actually go and produce a few seed heads, and it will be easily pollinated to rejuvenate it.
And that would then, they just automatically fall into the ground
Yep.
and come back.
Yeah, and just keep going, Robin. I mean, the beauty of red clover is that it's very good in a pasture mix. So we're saying sort of 3 to 4 kilos to the hectare. It has a totally different window of productivity than white clover to some extent, in that it's very much late spring through summer, autumn, is where its real grunt time is. High quality, very palatable to animals, and again, it fixes nitrogen. So that's a pretty important thing.
It seems to have a lot of leaf.
Yes, this is a leafy variety. Obviously, in this situation, this is a seed crop, so you're seeing it probably in its extreme. You know, quite a lot of leaves, but what I do like about it is it produces a lot of bulk. Yep.
Seems to be a poor cousin to white clover, though. It's not fashionable.
Increasingly becoming more fashionable as a complementary legume. So I wouldn't recommend in a pasture mix just putting red clover. I think you still need white clover, put red clover in. It's like building a potpourri of legumes in there to help complement the seasonal yield and the seasonal productivity. Really, look, you're probably 3 to 5 years for a red clover, to be fair, and probably. And the other beauty is that it tolerates and is not susceptible to the clover root weevil. So the issue we got with white clover, where we're getting problems with persistence, we don't have that with this red clover because it's resistant to that.
How does it get on with competition in a pasture mix?
It will tolerate that pretty well. You can overgraze it. A number of red clovers have been overgrazed. This has been bred for grazing. So this variety was specifically bred to go in a pasture mix for grazing. So it will tolerate rotational grazing. They don't tolerate set stocking. So by that I mean if you're going to put animals in a paddock and you're going to leave them there permanently and just let the pasture keep up with the animals, your red clover will disappear quite quickly, because that's not the sort of environment, the sort of condition it likes. It likes to be rotationally grazed, and yeah, it'll be fine. Very good ME, good energy, very palatable, and also makes excellent silage. I mean, you can get good yields off it, make excellent silage, excellent hay. So yeah, it's a multi-purpose species.
Bloat comes to mind, or the worry about that?
Look, any legume you've got that issue, Rob. You're going to have to take preventive precautions with whatever you use. The other issue that red clover has had in the past is that it's got a chemical in it which is called formanonetin. And formanonetin is a chemical that, on the one side, it gives it some additional insect resistance, but on the opposite side, it can affect, it produces estrogen, so it can affect fertility in animals. But they've been breeding a lot of the new modern red clovers with lower levels of formanotin. This variety's got low levels of formanotin, okay? So you're not going to have the problem with estrogen, the problem with fertility in animals. And that tended to be a bit of a counter to a lot of farmers wanting to use more red clover. Was they were thinking, well, you know, it grows at this time of year, now's the time when we're sort of putting the ram out, flushing the ewes. Gee whiz, I'm sort of working, I'm taking one step forward and one step backwards if I use red clover. But it's not the case with Rossi. Rossi's got low, you know, good low levels of formanotin, but it's still got a little bit there so that it gives it that pest tolerance.
And good old Seed Force, they're very good at finding what used to work exceedingly well and making it even better, and bringing it back for a subclover, all those other different things that they've been doing. Well done, Seed Force. Simon, on a different subject totally, there's a lot of people who are now using overseas workers, and if something untoward happens, it can get very complicated getting one of those people back to their homeland if they have a fatal accident or whatever.
Yes, you mean if a loved one of their relatives actually passes away, is that what you're meaning?
Well, both actually. If somebody dies here and needs to get home, or somebody over there dies and they've got to go.
Yes.
So two sides of the coin.
Yes, well, and you've got the logistics of getting someone deceased out of the country, and that's not a simple task. There's a lot of paperwork that's got to be completed, and clearances that need to be done through the airlines and customs, so that to facilitate that right the way through to the destination of where the person's going. And sometimes that may not necessarily mean their home village. It may be you know, the closest international airport, which may still be some distance. So depending on the country, that they may then, the family there may need to arrange transportation from that international airport to their home village, or you know, contact another funeral director in their homeland to actually arrange that further transportation.
Because a lot of that, well, I guess, would come back to the employer having to fix it, to go through the paperwork and the minefield.
It can do, especially if you're talking about migrant workers, because it may affect their visa, their working visa, especially if they leave the country. They may be on a single entry, and therefore they may have to actually reapply to come back into the country, or may not be eligible to come back into the country. So the employers may have to pre-approve that with immigration before they actually leave.
The other thing is, I guess you guys are on the peripheral, but bereavement leave would be very different to sickness leave.
Yes, well, I mean, legally, bereavement leave, you're entitled to 3 days. Sometimes people take more than that because it does take, you know, extra time to arrange things. And if you're talking about immigrants, they may need, sometimes, you know, their practices or procedures for the funeral rite may take 3 weeks, in some cases, by the time they actually return home. So yes, it can take a lot longer than the normal 3 days, and that is outside the bereavement, outside the sick leave.
So it is a bit of a minefield.
It can be, yes, yeah.
So how far in do you go as far as supporting, and I guess you sort of are there and you know the rules and regulations and what doors to knock on?
Well, sometimes, I mean, we can only guide people into the right agencies of where they need to go and probably get the direct answers from the agencies in that sense. Like I say before about Immigration New Zealand, I mean, things are changing there all the time, so, and it depends on the individual's visa or permit that they may have. So yes, so that we can certainly guide people into you know, who they need to talk to get that information, but it can sometimes open up more of a minefield than they expect.
Different cultures. I mean, I know, for example, Roddy McKinnon, whom you work with,
yes,
his brother-in-law is Samoan. He's the eldest son, so he's responsible for the funerals for their parents. I mean, there's different cultures that have got totally different thoughts. Totally
different ways that they deal with the rituals of a funeral, and what the responsibilities are for each of those family members that are left. You know, as you say, the eldest child in Samoan culture, they are responsible for the burial. Other cultures, it may be the grandchildren, or it may be the spouse that's responsible. Or sometimes it's the spouse that has no say, and it's the children that have all the say. So they can be sometimes left out of the equation there. So yes, it's quite different.
Bad accident ended up being fatal on a dairy farm, and the person needs to be taken back to the homeland. Some will go, yes, cremate here, and others you have to take the body back. I mean, you guys must have a volume of knowledge.
Well, there's also too, if it's an accident, they may be entitled to an ACC funeral grant. And that also means for migrants that are here, if they die here, or even tourists that are here in New Zealand, if they die here as a result of an accident, that grant is still available to them. And currently that's around $5,500. So that can go a long way towards actually covering some of that cost if they are to repatriate the person out of New Zealand. Or certainly if they are going to look at cremating them and repatriating just simply the ashes. But again, sometimes the cultures won't allow cremation. So that's got to be a consideration there.
Because it's some of these people come from pretty small villages, and no, they wouldn't be able to afford to put a body in an aeroplane.
Well, sometimes it's even trying to get communication to those villages. I mean, some of them don't have phones. So it may take time there as well. So again, that's where sometimes the employer may get called upon to actually contribute or assist with maybe some of the costs, depending on how long the person's been in their employment.
There's so many ifs and buts, Simon, because some religions say that you've got to have a burial within days, and others...
Yeah. So often, I mean, that's where a lot of those cultures or traditions sometimes have to be a little bit flexible, because simply in today's society it's not that easy to get a person from A to B. It's certainly a lot easier than it used to be, but because people have moved more and more around the world, it does make it a lot harder to get people back to their homelands, back to their villages, or back to their family for a burial or cremation.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you very much indeed. And that's why people like Simon and Roddy are around to help you through that. After the break, it's Federated Farmers. Welcome back to Rob's Country. And Bruce Willis has come out with some new stats.
He has. So Bruce sent a member advisory out to everyone yesterday with some really good news from MPI about primary export forecasts. So they're up $4.9 billion for the 2013-2014 year to $36.4 billion for the primary sector. So that's good news for everybody.
Yeah, the marketing people have been right on it.
Absolutely, and of course what's good for New Zealand agriculture is good for all New Zealand, so that's really good. But it does lead me, Rob, into a bit of a discussion that farmers need to be thinking about in terms of our growth going forward, and what that means in terms of how we grow agriculture while still looking after our water. Mm-hmm. So we've had lots and lots of chats about nitrates and farming to your nitrate baseline and bits and pieces. But what I wanted to talk about today was a debate that's starting to gain momentum nationally amongst farmers about how those nitrate baselines are set and what that means for your farming options going forward. So there's really two ways that these nitrate baselines are being set, depending on where you are. So some councils are doing what we call grandfathering nitrogen discharge allocations, or NDAs.
Grandfathering.
Grandfathering. That's the jargon. So basically, where you start now is what you get. So, if you're losing 60 Ks now, you get 60 Ks. If you're losing 4, you get 4. And obviously that approach is really nice and certain for those people that have got high losses, but it has huge implications for what you can do going forward with your land. The other way that some councils are doing, such as Otago Regional Council, are to set thresholds and basically say, if you're on a particular soil type and a particular catchment, this is the number that you get, and it's the same number for everybody who's in that same situation. Mm-hmm. And that's really where federated farmers and the primary sector industry need the feedback from farmers about where and how they want us to do this and what they want us to champion.
You mean you want them to actually talk to you?
Yes, to talk to us really? And have a think about it. I've just been in a meeting down in Selwyn, down at Lincoln actually, where this issue came to the fore very quickly, because we've got two systems running there, one which is based on grandfathering NDAs, but then moving to thresholds over the next couple of years. And heaps of feedback from farmers, all of those questions. Does this mean that because I've been really prudent with my fertiliser and my water, suddenly I'm being punished because,
Yeah, because I've been playing the game.
Yeah, I've been playing the game, now I've got this really low number. So lots and lots to
And
think
what's the
about.
answer to that?
I think the answer is probably a bit of a hybrid of the two. I'm a thresholds person myself, but I do think that when you set these thresholds, we have to have reduction regimes and paths down for people who are above the threshold that are really fair and reasonable. Because these guys, they're lawfully established. They set up their businesses based on good information at the time, so we can't have them stressing out or going to the wall with regulations they can't adhere to.
So how much room is there to move in this, do you think? Because it seems as though there's a fairly large stick involved.
There is. I think the room to move is in how we put it together. So the councils are definitely going to tell us the sort of the catchment loadings that they want to achieve. It's our job to then tell them how we want it divvied up, and what sort of model we want them to use to manage nitrogen amongst farmers.
And are you suggesting that there is room for negotiation and for round table discussion here, which is, if it is, it's very, very encouraging?
Yes, I think there is, and there's also lots of discussion going on within the primary sector, both at regional levels in places like Canterbury and also nationally. But what's missing a little bit from that debate at the moment is the farmer input, is the farmer telling their representatives, hey, this is how we'd like you to do it.
And working hand in glove with everybody so that everybody gets a win-win?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I guess the key message that I seem to get from every farmer is they like it fairly consistent. They like the same rules for each other. They don't like the idea that there's one rule for them and another rule for their next door neighbour.
Well, you can understand that because that's happening with the red zones for water and everything else. So
yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Federated Farmers phone number, which is one I know you'll be wanting to jot down on your screen now. Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed Rob's Country, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.